In every soul there lies an invisible treasury, a vault of divine supply, waiting to be claimed by the one who dares to speak the word of faith. When we speak of unlocking God's bank, we are not reaching outward to see something distant. We are awakening the limitless abundance already prepared for us from the beginning. For the universe is orderly, rich, and exact. It responds to the tone of our thoughts, the courage of our affirmations, and the purity of our expectation. Many wander through life believing that resources are scarce, that blessings must be earned through strain, or that destiny is shaped by circumstance. But the spiritual law whispers a different truth. What you boldly expect, you cannot help but receive. What you fear, you call forth. What you praise, expands. To unlock God's bank is to understand that supply is not a trickle but a river, ever flowing, ever unfailing. No door can truly be shut to the one who walks in alignment with divine timing, divine intuition, and divine authority. There is a key placed in every hand, the key of the spoken word. Words are not mere sounds, they are spiritual instruments, tuning our lives to the frequency of abundance or lack. When we speak with certainty, we summon the invisible forces that move mountains, rearrange paths, and open channels where none existed. Life, in its higher truth, is not governed by chance but by consciousness. The mind that dwells on limitation binds itself to limitation, but the mind that rests in faith draws to itself every good thing. The universe is exact. It cannot deliver wealth to one who believes only in poverty, nor joy to one who rehearses sorrow. But the moment you say with conviction, "Everything I desire is already mine," the law begins its silent work. Doors open, opportunities appear, unexpected help arrives. The impossible becomes the inevitable. To unlock God's bank is to release fear, for fear is the great shut-off valve. Fear drains the energy that would otherwise magnetize blessings. Faith, on the other hand, is the great conductor. It gathers, directs, and multiplies. Faith turns the tiniest seed of hope into a harvest. Faith transforms delays into divine appointments. Faith whispers, "What you seek is seeking you." As you step into this understanding, you step into a new reality, one where the spiritual bank is never empty, never delayed, never withholding. You do not beg for supply, you command it through alignment with divine law. You do not chase miracles, you invite them by becoming a vessel through which they can flow. You do not fear tomorrow, you bless tomorrow, and tomorrow blesses you. Tonight, I invite you to stand in the knowing that you are not separate from your good. You are its rightful heir. Your words are the combination, your faith the key, your expectation the door swinging open. The treasure is already yours. Unlock it. To speak the word of faith as the key to divine supply is to recognize that every utterance carries within it a seed of creative power. Words are more than communication. They are spiritual commands, designs issued to the invisible realm, instructions that determine what shape your life will assume. When you speak in faith, you are not merely hoping something will happen. You are authorizing it, granting it permission to manifest in your world. The word of faith is a decree, a declaration that aligns thought, emotion, and expectation with the unfailing abundance that originates from the divine. It is through the spoken word that one bridges the gap between the unseen and the seen, the spiritual and the material, the potential and the actual. Faith-filled speech reaches into the invisible bank of divine resources and draws forward that which has already been prepared. To speak the word of faith, you begin by understanding that your voice carries vibrational force. Every phrase you release travels through the universe as a signal, attracting conditions that resonate with its tone. Fear-laden words call forth obstacles, delays, and limitations, because fear is a form of faith turned upside down, belief in what you do not want. But a word spoken in faith carries a different energy. It carries assurance, certainty, and spiritual authority. It does not beg, wish, or plead. It commands, it claims, it announces that abundance is not something distant, but something already belonging to you in essence. The divine supply is ever present, yet it must be activated through alignment, and the word is the switch that flips the circuits of manifestation into action. When you speak in faith, you speak from the highest part of yourself, the part that knows its unity with infinite source. You refuse to speak from fear, lack, or doubt, because you understand that those vibrations are creative forces in themselves. Instead, you choose words that match the reality you desire to experience. This is not positive thinking alone. This is spiritual law in action. The word of faith is a command to substance itself, a decree that rearranges energy into form. It is the spoken affirmation that divine supply cannot fail, cannot diminish, cannot delay when one stands in the consciousness of rightful inheritance. The ancient spiritual laws teach that the spoken word sets the law of manifestation in motion. The instant you declare a thing, the universe begins its silent work of arranging circumstances, aligning people, opening pathways, or dissolving barriers. The shift may be invisible at first, but the invisible is always the birthplace of the visible. Faith is the conviction that the moment the word is spoken, the good is already on its way. You do not look to external evidence for confirmation, because external evidence is the last stage of manifestation. You look inward to the spiritual certainty that the divine bank responds immediately to the vibrational signature of faith. Speaking the word of faith also requires discipline. Many people cancel their own good by speaking faith in one moment and contradiction in the next. They affirm abundance, then speak of worry. They declare that supply flows, then complain of delays. Each contradictory word weakens the current, confuses the law, and interrupts the divine process. To master the word of faith is to cultivate consistency. You become vigilant about what comes out of your mouth, recognizing that every statement is a form of investment in your future conditions. You learn to speak with intention, clarity, and conviction. You learn to refrain from speaking anything you do not desire to manifest. To speak the word of faith is also to recognize the power of the present moment. The divine operates in the now, not in the distant future. When you declare your good as present, not pending, you align with the timeless nature of spiritual supply. You say, I am provided for now. My supply flows now. You affirm that the divine bank is already unlocked, that the resources you require are already moving in your direction. This present tense declaration is essential because the subconscious mind responds only to the language of now. It does not understand future promises. It understands present commands. By speaking in the present, you bring the invisible good into active circulation. The word of faith also requires feeling. A statement spoken without emotional conviction lacks magnetic power. Faith is not merely mental, it is vibrational. It must be felt to be effective. When you affirm divine supply with a sense of assurance, gratitude, or inner knowing, your emotion amplifies the command. It energizes the word, strengthens the signal, and deepens the alignment. Feeling is the magnet that draws supply from the invisible realm. Without feeling, the word remains dormant. With feeling, the word becomes a spiritual force capable of dissolving obstacles, attracting opportunities, and opening channels that previously seemed closed. Another essential aspect of speaking the word of faith is detachment from the how. The spoken word sets the vision, the universe determines the method. When you speak in faith, you release the need to micromanage the process. You do not dictate the route, the timing, or the form. You simply command the result, and trust that divine intelligence will orchestrate the perfect means. This detachment is a form of confidence. It demonstrates that you trust the supply, trust the law, trust the divine orchestration. Many delay their manifestations by insisting on one specific path. The word of faith keeps the command clear while leaving the unfolding to a wisdom far greater than human reasoning. Speaking the word of faith also dissolves worry. Worry is merely faith in negative outcomes, and it drains spiritual energy. When you speak the word consistently, worry has no room to attach itself. The mind becomes anchored, the heart becomes steadied, the energy field becomes harmonized. You are no longer tossed between fear and hope, you stand firmly in knowing. This stability is itself a magnet for divine supply. The universe responds most readily to the soul that has ceased wavering. To speak the word of faith is ultimately to recognize your divine authority. You are not a beggar at the gates of the universe. You are a co-creator endowed with the power to summon your own good. The divine bank is already filled with every supply your journey requires, and the word of faith is the key that opens its doors. To align consciousness with abundance, rather than limitation, is to shift the very foundation from which your life unfolds. For consciousness is the mold into which every circumstance, opportunity, and manifestation must pour itself. You do not attract what you wish for with your hands, but what you believe in the secret chambers of your mind. Every thought is a signal, every belief a magnet, every expectation a doorway opening or closing. When consciousness is aligned with abundance, it stands tall, steady, and receptive, drawing forth supply as naturally as a flower draws sunlight. When consciousness dwells in limitation, it becomes a shadowed room where blessings cannot fully enter, no matter how earnestly one knocks. Thus, the true work of prosperity begins not with effort but with inner alignment, the quiet but powerful choice to think, feel, and believe in harmony with the infinite, rather than the finite. To align with abundance is to understand that you are living in an orderly universe, a universe not governed by chance but by law. These laws do not bend to moods or circumstances, they respond to vibration, and consciousness is the vibration that sets all else into motion. When one cultivates an abundant consciousness, one begins to see beyond appearances. Instead of being hypnotized by temporary conditions, one recognizes the deeper spiritual truth. Supply is not earned, chased, or forced, it is allowed. Lack is not destiny, it is a mental habit. Abundance is not accidental, it is the natural state of a mind aligned with divine truth. To think in terms of abundance is not denial of facts, but recognition of higher truth. Facts change, truth endures. A depleted bank account is a fact. Divine supply is the truth. An obstacle is a fact. Infinite possibility is the truth. When consciousness is set on truth rather than temporary facts, the facts themselves begin to rearrange, dissolve, or transform. The mind becomes the director, not the victim. Circumstances respond to the inner shift as surely as a compass needle responds to the magnet. The moment you align consciousness with abundance, life begins to reorganize itself around your new inner belief. Aligning with abundance means releasing the mental patterns that cling to limitation. Society often trains individuals to expect struggle, to believe that resources are scarce, to assume that success is reserved for the fortunate few. These beliefs, repeated and absorbed, become inner ceilings that cap what one can receive. To shift consciousness is to gently and persistently tear down these ceilings, replacing them with spaciousness, with the knowing that divine supply is infinite, ever-flowing, and tailored to meet every need. Limitation is not a reality, but a viewpoint. Change the viewpoint, and life expands accordingly. The mind aligned with abundance begins to recognize opportunities where others see obstacles. It perceives possibilities hidden within challenges. It understands that every delay can become a blessing, every detour a redirection, every difficulty a doorway to a greater good. This does not come from naive optimism, but from a deep awareness that the universe is always working toward expansion. With this consciousness, one stops interpreting temporary difficulties as permanent verdicts. One stops shrinking before appearances. Instead, one remains anchored in the inner conviction that supply is inevitable for the one who expects it. Aligning with abundance also means releasing the tendency to worry. Worry is the mind rehearsing limitation, playing old fears like familiar songs even when they no longer serve. Worry constricts. It tightens the flow. It shrinks the field of possibility. A mind occupied with fear cannot receive inspiration, cannot recognize synchronicities, cannot hear the quiet inner guidance that leads to the next step. When consciousness shifts to abundance, worry loosens its grip. A spaciousness emerges, a calmness that whispers, all is provided. This calmness is not passive, it is powerful. It draws solutions swiftly because the mind is open, receptive, and unblocked. To align with abundance is to practice gratitude for the unseen as well as the seen. Gratitude is a signal to the universe that one is ready to receive more. It lifts the vibration instantly. Gratitude does not wait for evidence, it creates evidence. When one gives thanks for supply not yet visible, One affirms alignment with the reality that abundance is already in motion. Gratitude shifts the focus from what seems lacking to what is eternally present. It transforms the emotional climate, and the moment the emotional climate rises, conditions begin to rise in response. Aligning consciousness with abundance also involves imagination. The imagination is not idle fantasy, it is the blueprint of manifestation. What you vividly picture, you invite. What you emotionally rehearse, you prepare space for. The mind aligned with abundance imagines outcomes that uplift, scenarios that succeed, paths that open. It does not dwell on worst-case stories or repeat scenes of limitation. It rehearses triumph. It envisions provision. It sees doors opening even before they appear in the physical world. This alignment prepares the subconscious to guide you toward the people, ideas, and steps that bring the vision to life. To think abundantly is also to speak abundantly. Words are extensions of consciousness. A mind steeped in limitation will naturally speak limitation, complaints, doubts, predictions of difficulty. A mind aligned with abundance speaks differently. Its words bless the path, affirm supply, declare openness, and praise solutions yet unseen. These words reshape the inner climate, reinforcing the consciousness of abundance. The more one speaks from abundance, the more natural it becomes, until the old patterns of limitation no longer feel familiar or true. Aligning with abundance requires trust. Trust not in random chance, but in the divine order that governs all things. Trust is the bridge between the invisible and the visible. It carries one across the gap between intention and manifestation. Trust is the soul's quiet confidence that it is supported, guided, and supplied. With trust, one no longer forces outcomes or clings to desperate strategies. One takes aligned action, guided action, inspired action. Trust allows the flow to continue without obstruction, because one is no longer resisting, doubting, or tightening around the process. To align consciousness with abundance is to adopt a mental posture of openness. This openness is a readiness to receive from expected and unexpected channels alike. It is the willingness to be surprised by good, to recognize that supply can come through familiar routes or through new avenues entirely. Limitation consciousness tries to predict where good must come from. Abundance consciousness simply knows that good will come, and remains open to however it chooses to appear. When consciousness is aligned with abundance, life becomes cooperative. Circumstances shift in your favor. People show up with timing too perfect to be mere coincidence. Ideas come in flashes. Obstacles dissolve without effort. The path becomes smoother because the mind is no longer fighting itself with doubt, fear, or scarcity thinking. The outer world mirrors the inner world, and the inner world is radiating expectancy, openness, and trust in a universe that is both generous and precise. To release fear in order to allow spiritual flow is to remove the greatest obstruction between the soul and its divine inheritance, for fear is the contraction that restricts the natural movement of supply, guidance, and opportunity. Fear tightens the mind, closes the heart, narrows perception, and disrupts the intuitive currents through which life seeks to bless you. It is not punishment, but resistance, not a cosmic barrier, but an inward gripping that interrupts the smooth circulation of good. When fear is released, the channels open. Ideas arrive effortlessly. Solutions present themselves. The path clears with a kind of quiet inevitability. To let go of fear is to permit life to flow again. Fear often disguises itself as caution, realism, or preparation. Yet beneath these appearances, it is the same old vibration of distrust in the universe. It murmurs of what could go wrong, what might fail, what may never arrive. Fear casts shadows on the mind, causing one to imagine the worst and rehearse disappointment long before anything negative has occurred. These imagined scenarios, repeated often enough, imprint themselves into the subconscious, which then attempts to create outer conditions that match the inner rehearsal. In this way, fear becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, not because it has power of its own, but because one has unknowingly agreed with it. Releasing fear breaks this destructive agreement and replaces it with alignment to truth. To release fear does not mean to ignore the feeling or pretend it isn't there. It means to recognize it as an intruder, not a guide. Fear is not intuition. It is not divine warning. It is simply the echo of old patterns, old memories, old wounds that the mind has not yet dissolved. When fear arises, and one does not fuse with it, but simply observes it, its power weakens. Fear thrives when unexamined. It diminishes when seen. By choosing not to identify with fear, one begins the process of loosening its hold. Spiritual flow is natural. Fear is unnatural. A child enters the world without fear of supply, without worry about the next step, without anxiety about worthiness or deservedness. That original innocence is not naivete, but alignment. Fear is learned, alignment is innate. To release fear is to return to that original state of openness, the state where supply flows because one is not blocking it with anxious expectations. When you release fear, you return to the rhythm of divine order, the effortless movement of good toward you and through you. Fear is also a misuse of imagination. Instead of envisioning success, fear paints pictures of failure. Instead of anticipating provision, it anticipates lack. Instead of expecting support, it expects abandonment. Releasing fear means reclaiming imagination as a tool for creation rather than destruction. The same power that envisions what could go wrong can just as easily envision what will go right. The shift does not require force, it requires willingness. When imagination is redirected toward abundant possibilities instead of fearful predictions, the emotional climate changes, and the spiritual flow resumes. To release fear is to trust in the higher order that organizes the universe. Trust is the antidote to fear, not because trust eliminates uncertainty, but because trust recognizes that uncertainty is not danger. Trust acknowledges that one does not need to control every detail to be safe. Trust understands that the divine is always orchestrating circumstances for one's highest good, even when the route appears circuitous. When trust becomes the dominant vibration, fear loses its grip, and life begins to respond with synchronicities, openings, and unexpected blessings that seem to arrive with deliberate timing. Releasing fear also means letting go of the need to know how everything will unfold. The mind wants blueprints, guarantees, maps. It clings to the illusion that certainty equals safety. Yet spiritual flow requires space for the unknown. The unknown is where miracles are born. If one demands absolute predictability, one unintentionally shuts out the very channels through which the unexpected good could arrive. Releasing fear means embracing the unknown with confidence, understanding that divine intelligence fills every gap and lights every step at the exact moment it is needed. Fear constricts the body as much as the mind. It blocks intuition, tightens energy, and creates both emotional and physical tension. When fear is released, energy rises, creativity awakens, inner guidance becomes audible. The body relaxes into alignment. This physical shift is not minor. It is part of the spiritual flow. When the body is no longer in survival mode, inspiration can be heard clearly, and inspired action can be taken without hesitation. Releasing fear requires training the mind to interrupt spirals of anxious thinking before they gather momentum. Fear thrives on repetition. It grows louder when indulged. The moment a fearful thought appears, one can mentally declare, "This is not my truth." This simple refusal interrupts the pattern and allows a higher perspective to emerge. When practiced repeatedly, this becomes a habit, and fear loses the repetitive fuel that once kept it alive. Gradually, the mind becomes quieter, more centered, and more responsive to intuitive nudges rather than fearful projections. To release fear is also to stop rehearsing past wounds. Fear often originates from memory, a time when something went wrong, a disappointment that still echoes, a betrayal that shaped expectation. But memory is not prophecy. The past is not destiny. When one clings to old hurts, one unconsciously expects them to repeat. Releasing fear means releasing the storylines that tie consciousness to old pain. It means recognizing that every moment is new, every situation fresh, every possibility untouched by the past, unless you drag the past into the present. Letting go of fear is, in many ways, letting go of the past itself. Fear also dissolves when one affirms one's divine identity. Fear arises from the belief that one is alone, unprotected, unsupported, or limited. But when one remembers that they are connected to infinite source, fear loses its foundation. One cannot simultaneously believe in divine support and be consumed by fear. The deeper the awareness of one's spiritual origin, the weaker the fear becomes. Alignment with truth naturally displaces fear. Just as light naturally dissolves darkness without struggle or argument. Releasing fear expands receiving capacity. Fear is the voice that says, "You might fail, you are not worthy, this is too much, you cannot handle it." These messages shrink the soul's ability to receive the very blessings that are trying to reach it. When fear is released, receiving becomes natural. Opportunities that once seemed intimidating become welcome. Blessings that once seemed overwhelming feel appropriate. Supply that once felt too large for your identity suddenly feels like a rightful inheritance. The release of fear enlarges the inner container so that greater good can flow. Fear also blocks the circulation of love. Love is the highest vibration, the force through which intuition, abundance, healing, and guidance flow. Fear is the opposite vibration, a closing of the heart, a pulling inward, a withdrawal from connection with the divine. When fear is released, love flows freely, and with love comes clarity, comfort, provision, and spiritual power. Love opens doors that fear keeps shut. Love moves mountains that fear cannot budge. Love restores confidence, courage, and connection, which are essential for allowing spiritual flow. To release fear is to step into the unburdened self, the self that trusts, listens, receives, and flows. It is the return to openness, to harmony with divine wisdom, and to the natural rhythm through which supply, guidance, and opportunity constantly move. To expect good to manifest with certainty is to take your rightful place as a deliberate co-creator in a universe governed by precise spiritual laws, for expectation is the magnetic force that draws invisible good into visible form. Expectation is not passive hope, it is active faith. It is the confidence that what you seek is already seeking you, that every door destined to open is already turning on its hinges, that the divine has aligned supply long before you felt the need. When you expect good with certainty, you are not wishing, you are affirming, you are not doubting, you are knowing. This knowing becomes the silent architect shaping the conditions of your life. Expectation is a vibration, and the universe responds to vibration with perfect accuracy. The one who expects delay experiences delay. The one who expects struggle attracts struggle. But the one who expects good prepares the way for good to rush in. Expectation sets the tone. It creates an atmosphere within the mind that either invites or repels the blessings that hover at the edge of manifestation. When you expect good, your mind becomes an open gate rather than a locked door. You create internal permission for supply to enter. To expect good with certainty requires a shift from external evidence to internal conviction. Many wait for signs before deciding whether their good is on the way, but spiritual law operates in the opposite direction. The signs follow the expectation. The moment you anchor your consciousness in the assumption that good is unfolding, the outer world begins its subtle rearrangements to reflect your belief. Circumstances shift, conversations align, unexpected pathways appear. None of this begins until expectation is firmly rooted, for expectation is the seed, and manifestation is the harvest. Expectation works hand in hand with imagination. When you expect good, your imagination naturally begins to picture favorable outcomes. You envision success, harmony, abundance, and support. These mental pictures become blueprints for the subconscious mind, which then directs your actions, perceptions, and decisions toward the fulfillment of the vision. When expectation is strong, doubt cannot linger. Doubt thrives in the absence of mental imagery, but expectation fills the mind with scenes of prosperity and ease, leaving no space for fearful imaginings. To expect good is also to align with divine timing. Many fear that what they desire will arrive too late, or not at all, and this fear disrupts the flow. When you expect good with certainty, you release urgency and embrace trust. You understand that the universe is both generous and precise. The timing of manifestation is always perfect, even when it appears delayed. Expectation calms the anxious mind, reminding it that everything unfolds in the right hour, in the right way, through the right channels. The more you trust this rhythm, the more quickly the good appears, because you are no longer resisting it with worry. Expectation influences behavior as powerfully as it influences energy. When you expect good, you take steps that align with that assumption. You speak with greater confidence. You make bolder choices. You notice opportunities that would have been invisible to a mind expecting disappointment. You behave as though success is natural, which invites success to become natural. Expectation shapes posture, both physical and spiritual. It uplifts the heart, straightens the spine, clarifies the mind. It turns hesitation into movement, and movement into momentum. Expecting good with certainty also strengthens intuition. Fear clouds intuition, expectation sharpens it. When you trust that good is coming, you become more sensitive to the intuitive nudges that guide you toward it. These impressions may be subtle, a sense to call someone, a sudden idea, a shift in direction, but they are clear to the mind that expects help rather than hindrance. Expectation attunes your inner ear to the frequency of guidance. It makes you receptive to inspiration that previously seemed like random thought. With certainty in your good, intuition becomes a faithful compass. To expect good is to reject the belief that life is unpredictable or hostile. Many have been conditioned to brace for disappointment, to assume that something will go wrong, to protect themselves with pessimism. This expectation becomes a self-fulfilling pattern. To shift out of it, one must consciously cultivate the opposing vibration. This is not unrealistic optimism, it is spiritual realism. It acknowledges that the universe is fundamentally supportive, that every situation contains the seed of blessing, that good is the natural outcome when consciousness is aligned with truth. Expecting good is choosing to interpret life through the lens of divine benevolence rather than past wounds. Expectation is also a powerful purifier of the subconscious. The subconscious holds the residue of old beliefs, memories of failure, impressions of scarcity, echoes of rejection. When you repeatedly expect good, these old imprints begin to dissolve. Expectation introduces a new pattern, a new mental rhythm that gradually overwrites the outdated programs. The subconscious, once saturated in fear or limitation, becomes reconditioned to anticipate good experiences. When the subconscious shifts, manifestation accelerates, because the subconscious is the engine that drives your reality. To expect good with certainty is to place full trust in the divine source of supply. It means acknowledging that no demand can exceed the capacity of infinite supply, that no need can arise without its solution already prepared. Expectation is the affirmation that divine intelligence misses nothing, forgets nothing, overlooks nothing. It is the recognition that the same force that guides stars, seasons, and tides guides your personal affairs with equal precision. When expectation is rooted in this understanding, it becomes unshakable. Expectation also influences emotional tone. A person expecting good radiates calmness, lightness, confidence. This emotional vibration becomes its own magnet, attracting people and situations that resonate with it. Emotion is energy in motion. Expectation directs that energy upward, clearing space for higher conditions. Negative expectation drags emotion downward, slowing the flow of good. Thus, a shift in expectation naturally elevates emotion, which in turn accelerates manifestation. To expect good with certainty is to choose alignment over anxiety. It means deliberately focusing on the unfolding of blessings rather than the possibility of setback. This focus does not ignore challenges, but views them through a lens of inevitable resolution. Expectation declares that every challenge contains its own answer, that every closed door leads to a better one, that every delay hides a hidden orchestration. When you expect good, even difficulties become part of the path rather than detours from it. Expectation also increases receptivity. Many people desire good but unknowingly resist it through doubt, fear, or disbelief. Expectation opens the hands of the soul. It allows one to receive without hesitation, without guilt, without questioning whether one is worthy. Expectation is the acceptance of worthiness. It is the acceptance of divine generosity. It is the acknowledgement that good is appropriate, natural, and deserved. To expect good with certainty is to inhabit a state of consciousness from which life must respond with cooperation, harmony, and abundance. Confidence becomes creativity. Trust becomes movement. Inner assurance becomes outer blessing. Expectation is not merely a thought, it is a spiritual stance, a declaration of alignment with the highest order of reality. To recognize yourself as the rightful heir to infinite provision is to awaken to the truth of your divine origin, for lack, limitation, and struggle are not the natural inheritance of the soul. You were not born into scarcity. You were born out of an infinite source whose essence is abundance, creativity, and ceaseless supply. This recognition is not arrogance, but alignment. Alignment with the spiritual laws that govern expansion, growth, and continual blessing. When you see yourself as an heir, you stop approaching life as a beggar seeking crumbs and begin walking as one who knows that the storehouse of the universe is open, available, and overflowing. You do not plead for what is already yours. You claim it through awareness, expectation, and alignment. To recognize yourself as an heir is to understand that supply is not earned by merit or effort alone. It is not a prize for perfection or a reward for suffering. It is a natural extension of your identity as a spiritual being. Just as the sun does not ration its light, divine supply does not ration its gifts. What restricts flow is not the universe withholding, but consciousness resisting. When consciousness expands to accept the idea of rightful inheritance, resistance dissolves and blessings move unobstructed. The shift is internal, a movement from "I hope life will take care of me" to "life must take care of me because I am rooted in infinite source." To see yourself as an heir changes your internal posture. You stand differently within yourself. You think with greater spaciousness, act with greater confidence, speak with greater authority. You no longer shrink before challenges. You rise knowing that solutions are already provided. You no longer fear the future, you welcome it, understanding that the divine has already prepared provisions for every step you will take. This identity as an heir creates an inner anchoring that no temporary difficulty can shake. You become rooted in spiritual truth rather than tossed by appearances. Recognizing your divine inheritance also means releasing the belief that abundance is limited or competitive. Many imagine supply as a small pool from which they must carefully draw, believing that taking too much deprives someone else. But spiritual supply is infinite, ever generating, ever circulating. It does not diminish when shared, it multiplies. When you see yourself as an heir, you understand that there is no shortage of good, no scarcity of opportunity, no ceiling on what can flow into your life. This awareness dissolves envy, comparison, and competition, replacing them with assurance, generosity, and peace. Seeing yourself as an heir means understanding that you are connected directly to Source, not dependent on external channels. People, jobs, and circumstances may serve as instruments, but they are not the source. The source is infinite and expresses through whatever channels are most aligned with your path. When one channel closes, another opens. When one door shuts, another swings wide. The heir is not disturbed by shifting outer forms because their supply does not come from form. It comes through form. This knowledge grants freedom from attachment and fear, allowing you to move through life with trust rather than anxiety. To recognize yourself as the rightful heir is to dissolve the belief in unworthiness. Many subtly reject their own good because they believe they must earn it, prove themselves, or become someone else before they can receive. But spiritual inheritance is not something to qualify for, it is something to awaken to. Worthiness is inherent. It cannot be increased by striving or decreased by mistakes. When you remember that you are an heir, you release guilt, shame, and self-judgment that once blocked the flow of good. You let blessings reach you without resisting, deflecting, or diminishing them with disbelief. Recognizing your inheritance also means understanding that the universe responds to identity before it responds to action. When you identify as one who is supplied, guided, and supported, your actions naturally align with that identity. You make choices based on abundance rather than fear, based on expansion rather than contraction. You take inspired steps rather than desperate ones. Your decisions reflect trust rather than anxiety. Identity shapes behavior, and behavior shapes outcomes. When identity aligns with divine truth, outcomes align with divine provision. To know yourself as an heir is to walk with the assumption of favor. You expect doors to open, opportunities to arise, ideas to flow, and support to appear. You assume that life is on your side. This assumption becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, for the universe mirrors the expectations you hold about yourself. If you see yourself as unsupported, life reflects that belief. If you see yourself as destined for struggle, struggle appears. But when you see yourself as inherently supported, inherently guided, inherently connected to infinite supply, life begins shaping itself around that inner conviction. Recognizing your spiritual inheritance also transforms the way you respond to obstacles. Where once you might have seen walls, you now see temporary illusions awaiting dissolution. Where once you saw setbacks, you now see redirections. Where once you saw delays, you now see divine timing rearranging itself. The heir knows that every challenge carries within it a provision, a lesson, or a blessing. With this perspective, obstacles lose their power to intimidate or discourage. They become stepping stones rather than stumbling blocks. To see yourself as an heir is also to embrace the truth that abundance is your natural state. Just as a river is meant to flow and a seed is meant to grow, you are meant to receive, create, and expand. Abundance is not a luxury reserved for a select few. It is the birthright of every soul aligned with the divine. This understanding removes the false divide between spiritual life and material provision. It reveals that spiritual alignment naturally produces material support, because the outer world is simply a reflection of the inner state. Recognizing your rightful inheritance also influences the subconscious mind, which governs habits, beliefs, and expectations. When you repeatedly affirm your identity as an heir, the subconscious begins to accept this truth and reorganize your internal patterns accordingly. Old beliefs of lack lose their influence. Scarcity thinking weakens. Self-doubt fades. The subconscious becomes a powerful ally, generating thoughts, impulses, and feelings that align with abundance rather than limitation. When the subconscious accepts your inheritance, manifestation accelerates effortlessly. To know yourself as an heir is to trust the guidance that arises from within. The divine does not simply provide resources, it provides direction. It places ideas in your mind, impulses in your heart, and signs along your path. When you accept your identity as an heir, you begin listening more closely to this guidance. You follow intuitive nudges with greater confidence. You recognize that every inspired thought is part of your inheritance, part of the divine provision designed to guide you toward your highest good. Guidance becomes not occasional but constant, because the heir expects to be led. Recognizing yourself as an heir also awakens gratitude. Not gratitude born from desperation or comparison, but deep, steady gratitude rooted in awareness. Gratitude becomes your natural state because you see the divine hand in everything, in the support you receive, the ideas that come, the timing of events, the unfolding of opportunities. This gratitude lifts your vibration, expanding your capacity to receive even more. The more you acknowledge your inheritance, the more clearly you see its expression in every area of your life. To recognize yourself as the rightful heir to infinite provision is to step into a consciousness where abundance is not only possible but inevitable, not only available but flowing, not only hoped for but assumed.